Hello, I'm Lindley Gooden. Welcome to Money Live and Insurance Innovators special broadcast series, Next Gen Customer Experience in Financial Services, sponsored by Smart Communications. Great to have you with us today. Now, over the course of the next few weeks, we'll be tackling this year's biggest and most pressing customer experience issues, from protecting the customer interface in an open economy to avoiding the most serious pitfalls in data handling. And we'll be joined by a brilliant lineup of experts who'll help to shed light on how to retain customers in an increasingly uncertain and competitive landscape. Now, we have guests from banking, from insurance and lending, including the CEO of Consumer Banking and Payments at Barclays. We'll also be joined by the FCA. And before we kick off today's discussion, a quick reminder that we want to hear from you. As always, please do share your experiences and your comments throughout the session. Just leave a comment using the plus button below. Okay, today's episode is all about how to build customer trust to reduce churn and increase loyalty. According to recent surveys, the financial services industry has an 18.6% turnover rate, which is among the highest in any industry. So we'll start by discussing how you can build stronger bonds with customers and make the switch from faceless provider to empathetic life partner. We'll look at some of the key issues, including how to support customers beyond the pandemic, focus very much on their needs, and how to add value and offer smarter solutions, as well as maintaining a strong customer interface. And helping us to understand the subject, all the different bits and pieces, is Martin Suter, Chief Product Officer at Sentis at Smart Communications. Hello, Martin, good to see you there.
Hi, Lindley, and thank you for having me as one of your guests.
Wonderful to have you here, and a big thank you to Smart Communications for sponsoring today's episode. We couldn't do it without you. Well, let's just have a little chat first of all. Why do you think trust is so absolutely integral in retaining customers?
Well, trust is something fundamental. I think it forms the basis of every relationship, be it between people in a team, or even in a relationship between a customer and the financial service provider. So it is this foundation that makes it possible for the customer to be receptive to offers. But it is also the cornerstone that enables the customer to disclose information about himself.
Financial services, has often struggled to build and retain trust, again, perhaps because of reputation. Why do you think that is?
Well, building and maintaining trust as a company is a demanding challenge. And you have to realize that, especially in the financial service industry, a high level of trust is needed. So in contrast to an online shop where I just order a book, banks and insurance companies are about much more. It's about my earned money. It's about my security. So we are talking about fundamental needs of every human being, right? So in which this industry support us. So I even see it as a big differentiator compared to other companies, such as tech giants, that financial services providers still enjoy trust. So, and it is precisely this trust that must be preserved for the future.
Absolutely.
So the pandemic has not changed much in that level of trust, but it does increase the pressure for the industry to find ways to further build trust and loyalty.
Absolutely. And what a pressure it's been. We're about to hear a lot of things actually in our session now. But first of all, from the CEO of Barclays on consumer payments, on how he plans to drive trust and build loyalty. Look, what do you think is at stake if organizations don't do that?
Well, I think there is a lot at stake. Failure in this area would push the bank or insurance company into the background. So the industry loses face and can no longer act in a customer-centric way. So the consequence is to operate in the background behind the big platforms and marketplaces out there. And as already said, trust is the basis of every relationship. So if you do it right and foster this, you will eventually go from being a service provider to a life partner.
Martin, thanks very much. Let's go straight to Ashok Vaswani, CEO of Consumer Banking and Payments at Barclays. Now let's talk about his plans to build trust and also pivot to meet customer needs. Ashok, thanks very much for joining us. Hello, how are you?
Very good. How are you? Very nice to be with you this morning.
Great to see you there. Now, look, the last time that you spoke to us, you made some pretty powerful observations about the importance of purpose-led banking, what you think that means, and how crucial it is to do right by existing and prospective customers. And you also told us how profit and purpose don't need to be mutually exclusive. In fact, how deeply linked they really need to be right now. So We'll remind ourselves of that very shortly. And also then today focus specifically on the shift in customer needs, how the industry can meet them and where the opportunities lie for adding greater value. Let's set the scene first of all. Good to have you with us. Look, when we last spoke, the world was in quite a different place. We're starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully, but there's a lot of uncertainty out there still. So how do you think banks can really continue to support customers? What can you guys do to make customers' lives a lot easier?
You're absolutely right. There does seem to be light at the end of the tunnel. And as we emerge out of the medical pandemic, not that it's over, we still have to be extremely careful with the Delta variant and other mutants. So we got to continue to be very, very careful. But at least in the UK, we are starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. As we emerge from this, we got to understand what the implications on the real economy are going to be. The governments have pumped in, and the UK government has done an incredible job of sustaining the economy and pumped in a lot of money, somewhere between 16 to 18% of GDP. As some of these support mechanisms are started to kind of pulled away, what are the impact that has on the broader economy? What happens to employment/unemployment? Most importantly, what happens to inflation, and how does that affect the everyday person?
Yeah.
I think those are the kind of questions that we'll have to be continuously mindful of and help customers through this transitionary period till we get back to a more normalized environment.
Yeah, you have to deal with the macro, don't you? You can't just deal with the micro straight away. You can't know exactly what every customer wants right now, although, of course, there is technology there that can help with that. You've spoken about the needs for banks to find and solve customer pain points, not least to stay relevant. What do you think the pain points are? How are they evolving? What's coming up?
So, look, I think the focus on customer pain points has not changed. That's one thing that's not changed. Technology is evolving very, very quickly, which is helping us solve these customer pain points. I think the purpose of solving customer pain points remains the same. I think the tools that we have got much, much, much better. The problem statements are going to continue to kind of evolve, right? And the fundamental need of a customer to take care of his or her financial affairs definitely has not changed.
Yeah.
What the tools are now allowing us to do is to take customer journeys across various ecosystems. So, for example, this is not about just automating or digitizing your banking. It's about automating or digitizing the entire commerce, whichever the merchant may be, right? At the end of the day, the customer wants to buy something or wants to do something, and how we automate it end to end for the customer. Right from where the customer starts that buying journey, what is the right thing to buy, what's the best deal the customer can get for it, to actually being able to do the transaction, pay for the transaction, get a receipt maybe digitally, get further insights. So end to end across ecosystems, digitization is what's going to become absolutely critical. That's relevant for the customer. That's relevant for our corporate clients as well. Now, in all of this, the one thing, Lindley, should not forget is that this time around, we cannot afford to leave a section of society behind.
Yeah.
Right. So those people who are not that digitally savvy, right? How do we make it that easy, and how do we provide them the tools and stuff to be actually able to participate on the digital bandwagon?
Yeah, and in terms of offering a really excellent customer experience, if you don't understand and almost feel the sentiments of the customer, then you're also missing quite a lot of the equation there. You need to understand what motivates what the customer's feeling as well.
Absolutely, and that's why we got to make it so intuitive and so easy, and provide those extra tools to be able to actually get that done. Right.
Yeah. Do you think there's been a change in expectations, Ashok? Do you think that through COVID and through perhaps the way we're living that's changed quite a lot, the way we work that's changed in many ways quite a lot. Do you think that our expectations have shifted?
Clearly, customer expectations have shifted. In fact, they were shifting, and again, I think in a short time frame in 2020, starting on 2021, they've just kind of moved. Like it's like 3 to 5 years kind of shift. All that's happened in 12 to 15 months,
Yeah.
because fundamentally the way you work, the way you interact with your home has kind of shifted, and therefore you know the way you transport yourself has kind of changed. How you interact, what you expect to have stuff delivered home, how easy it is, how do you kind of deal with returns, transaction sizes. So much has changed in the last 15 to 18 months.
The fact that you are thinking about outcomes, you are thinking about what customers really want at the end of the day in order to have a transaction that achieves what they want to do. Do you think that they understand, and could there be more a connection between you so that customers actually offer you that data, that they start to work more closely with you in some ways?
So, the way I think about it is the way water flows. Water always flows through the easiest route, right? And eventually, over a period of time, it deepens the channels is exactly right?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing, right? And so, what we've got to do is that we've got to try and make it so easy, so convenient, right? Yet protective. That is very, very, very important.
Yeah.
As you know, in the UK, things like fraud and scams is going through the roof. So, how do you make it so easy, so convenient, yet secure and safe? And if you can actually get that customer experience uh, evolved, designed, executed, then customers will flow through it like water.
Absolutely. It's a nice phrase. That could be the headline for our discussion. Okay, look, let's look at innovation for a second. Look, it's really important to keep innovating, and potentially, there's been a lot of innovation, clearly in the way that we interact with our banks, but also it's been under pressure in some ways because there's been so much to do day to day during the pandemic. What do you think we should be prioritizing to stay ahead of, in particular, the competitive curve, to make sure that innovation is very much part of what we do next as an industry?
So I think if there's a single thing that the banking industry needs to do, is to remain front and center of customers. There's a huge risk that we are pushed into the plumbing or pushed into the background, right? We've got to stay relevant to the customer and stay front and center with the customer. And therefore the customer comes to you. Relevance, trust, faith, responsiveness. Those are the kinds of things which will keep us relevant. And those are the kinds of things that we've got to constantly innovate so that we become the place to go to from a customer's perspective. If we get pushed to the background, if we get pushed to the plumbing, it will be a very, very difficult place to get out of.
Particularly with so many new players in the market, and I guess partnerships is part of that. In order to be relevant, to still be responsive, then partnerships have to very much be up that pecking order in terms of the priorities of any bank at the moment.
Partnerships has to become so important because the speed of change is just ramped up so much. It's so fast, right? That for any one company to think that they can do everything, right? Or a bank to think that they can do everything is going to be really, really hard, right? If we're going to stay relevant, what is going to be most needed is our ability to integrate and be the best aggregator to bring the best solution to stay relevant to our customers.
On the topic of digital innovation and also convenience and accessibility, which is so important to us as customers, how do you think they will actually change and drive future products and services?
I think you just got to put the customer at the center of everything that you do. You start with the customer and you keep trying to redefine what end-to-end means, right? And if you can keep defining what end-to-end means and think about end-to-end in a different way, you're done, right? So, for example, let's take a simple example, right? Up to a point, end-to-end meant getting a mortgage. But is it really end-to-end? Because what happens post getting the mortgage, right? What happens is if it's a buy to let, then what about tenancy? What about protecting the tenant? What about protecting the 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 one who's renting out the property? What
Absolutely.
about collecting the payments? What about maintenance? What about council tax? So if you keep putting the customer in the center and saying, okay, what is end to end, and redefining end to end,
Yeah.
I think that is at least one way of thinking about how you make it more convenient and therefore more relevant for your customer. So, what are the biggest pain points, and what is the dimension against which, or the continuum against which you're really going end to end?
The pain points are one end, and then of course there's the point of potential. It's a new phrase. I haven't used it before. What are the benefits? We're a selfish lot. We want tangible benefits. Are there any good examples of where it's really worked? The banks have gone beyond in order to communicate and also then offer customers something really special.
So Lenny, for example, we have this trade and upgrade offer with a very good partner of ours, Apple, right?
Yeah.
And the ability to digitally, if I've got an iPhone or whatever, to upgrade it to iPhone 12 with a bunch of clicks and it's all delivered my home. I ship the old phone back and I'm all set up. I'm done. I mean, that's one kind of incredible example, right? Those are the kinds of things, which we've got to get more and more savvy about.
Where can data come in? Where can you really start to focus the usefulness, the use cases of your data?
Yeah, so there is no doubt, there's absolutely no doubt that we as a bank and every other bank has a lot of data.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you really leverage that data, right? First of all, therefore, you need the data architecture and data standards to actually make that data something consumable,
Yeah.
right? And then consumable by whom? One is consumable by the customer. So our ability to actually give them insights, right, into their behavior, what can help them improve their economic lives,
Yeah.
right? It is data that helps us underwrite better, underwrite more smartly. What can a person afford? What can a person not afford? It's about knowing and never ever having to ask a customer for the same piece of data twice.
Yeah.
It's about being smart and saying, okay, I have, let's say, your driving license. Automatically, I know the expiry date. Can I, first of all, inform you, by the way, your driving license is expiring? Two,
Yeah.
can you update the new driving license? Right? Then it's finally also about helping corporates get a better understanding of leveraging our data so that we are able to provide more relevance
Yeah.
to them. But I think different banks are making a lot of progress. I personally am spending a lot of time because that's the best way to understand. Look, fundamentally, if you think about it, then we think about private banking. What is
Yeah.
great about private banking? It's because your private banker knows everything about you and your family and can help you, right? That is based on the knowledge a person holds about you. Now, when you got millions and millions of customers, you can't have millions and millions of staff who are going to look after the customers. The business model doesn't work. The question is, how do you leverage technology and data to be able to provide private banking services to somebody who doesn't need or doesn't have to hold that kind of money with a bank? How many times have you ever said, how come they don't know this about me?
Hmm.
Right? They know, I mean, I have all my transactions going through them. They know where I'm traveling. How come they don't know blah? Right? And it's just incredible. And you think about it and you say, wow, we should really have known this, right? And if we had known this, what would we have done with it? And the kind of response we get from our customers when we reach out to them in this fashion is just incredible. And that's when you feel, that's when you really say this whole purpose and profit. I don't know why people think about it as opposing. I think they're so interlinked and tightly interlinked.
Absolutely. Well, it's been fascinating talking to you. Wonderful to have you with us, Ashok. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful stuff. Now, there's lots to unpick from what Ashok said, and to help me, I'm joined by our wonderful expert panel. First of all, Jason Moore. Jason is the Chief Technology Advocate at Starling Bank. Jason, good to see you again. How are you?
I'm very well, Lindy. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good to have you here. Next, we have Grace Hanson, the wonderful Grace Hanson. Grace is Chief Claims Officer at Hiscox. Grace, great to see you again.
Lovely to see you again, Linley.
Really good to see you. And last but certainly not least, let's welcome back Martin Suter, Chief Product Officer, Ascentis at Smart Communications. Martin, it's been so long. How are you?
Hi, Linley. I'm doing well, thanks.
Good to see you again. Okay, so let's start off. How do you think the industry is faring when it comes to building consumer trust? Perhaps, Jason, I can go to you first of all. How do you think we're doing in banking on consumer trust?
Yeah, I think we're doing, let's say, much better than we were doing 10 years ago. I think that there has been a concerted effort in the industry to try and improve how they are tackling customer trust. I think banks have realized that they need to focus on consumer needs more, and give more information to customers and so on. And I'll plug Starling here and say that Starling and the other neobanks have done a lot to try and push that along, to force all banks across the industry to really consider what services and products they're offering to their customers and how they can be offered in a way that really helps those customers live a good financial life.
Yeah. Grace, look, in Hiscox's case, I guess it's a very similar situation. What has been customer trust has been talked about for many, many years. But a few years ago, I think there was an inflection point when it went beyond a conversation about customer trust and we've got to get this sorted right away. And we actually do have the tools at our fingertips to do this.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. I think, at least for insurance, COVID has really undermined the consumer's trust in the insurance product, and it has really brought to light, I think, that the product hasn't contemplated some of the newer risks that we face, whether it's climate change in the form of disasters in the US where people have to be moved out of homes, or in the UK, the lockdowns. So we've got some work to do, I think, in insurance to rebuild that trust. And to create products that are more meaningful for customers that work in the digital age. But I mean, we were on that journey to begin with at Hiscox, which we did start a few years ago, and it is a journey, and we learn lessons along the way. And I think we'll continue to do that with the rest of the industry, because we were certainly not alone, I think, in learning that lesson.
Yeah. Martin, we started off this session by asking how important customer trust is. Consumer trust is clearly very important. You're already hearing some of that broken down into the two industries. Look, I mean, it's not easy, and insurance in particular has taken a hit reputation-wise because of COVID. It is so difficult to do that. When you get to the practicalities, it's all very well saying trust is important, but how on earth do you do it? That's the question.
Yeah, fully agree. I mean, as I said before, it's a demanding challenge to always rebuild this trust, and I think it's really to all time to find new ways how to improve and how to build up that loyalty. So I think that's an ongoing process. And
yeah, it really is. It can't be done overnight. That's absolutely right. One thing Ashok was talking about quite a lot was purpose-led banking. Jason, back to you for a second. Purpose-led banking. What are your feelings about that? How important is that purpose? I suppose you just have to choose your purpose and make sure that follows through to everything you do with the customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for me, the important purpose of banking, when you're talking about current account banking, is to serve your customers very well, and to be able to provide a service that gives the customers the ability to control their finances and so on. I think that that is the key purpose. I think you should focus on in that sector of banking, all sectors of banking, but very specifically that one. And I think if you try and layer on additional purposes, you might start to lose yourself a bit. I think that really what you want to do is drill down to what are we doing to enable the customers? How are we, we taking finance and removing it as a barrier to people, and making it not a barrier but making it be an enabler for them? That's really what you've got to do. And I think that is the purpose that I'd want all people involved in consumer banking to be focused on.
Martin, I see you nodding there. You agree with that? Are there any things that the common stumbling points in terms of building a purpose and building that through the services that you offer? It is a difficult situation to do that. You can't just dream up a purpose and apply that the next day.
Yeah, absolutely not. But I think it's a very good and interesting approach to build trust. And for example, a purpose-driven bank is a bank that incorporates doing good with making money. So doing good is doing good for the planet, for our children, for the future. So it's not as idealistic as it sounds, and actually it's much easier than it seems. But the hard part is being willing to shift that mentality.
Understanding the outcomes, understanding what customers really need from you is a good purpose to have. And I guess listening to them as well, so that you really understand that, is another great purpose. How do you distill those purposes down to something that really works on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about what your value proposition is in insurance. Our value proposition is we try and absorb the risks that consumers face. So if you think about a typical property policy, we're insuring a home, and I think the more old-fashioned view of that is, if the wind blows, we'll take care of it. If a fire burns it down. Today's value proposition is end-to-end. We'll help you protect against that. We'll put in leak monitoring tools to allow you to identify leaks before they happen. Perhaps we'll actually help you with the rebuilding of your home, and we'll be more involved in that process and make it smoother for you. So it's understanding that the risk isn't just this little sliver; it's a totality. So the world is evolving. There's a lot of new risks for humans out there. Social media has created some, cyber has created some, climate change is creating some. I'm a great believer that businesses exist for the humans that we serve, and success is ultimately about appreciating that. But what people need changes all the time, right? So we need to be attuned to that.
If we stay with trust, because this session is about trust, Jason, to engender trust, to make trust part of your relationship, which builds the relationship, clear communication. I think, Martin, you talked about clarity earlier on. Being really clear with customers about what you're doing for them, and not necessarily selling that all the time, but them seeing it evidentially through the processes that you put them through.
Yeah, absolutely. And making sure that the clarity is presented at different levels as well, because different people will need different levels of clarity, levels of information, and so on. It's bad to not tell anyone anything, and just to keep all the data for yourself, but it's also bad to just throw walls of text at people and, say, here are all the terms and conditions. Do you agree? Do you have 5 hours to read them? Both of those are not good approaches to being really being clear. And I think the other thing being clear about, which is important, is making sure that you're clear about what you're getting out of the relationship, and why you're doing it in the first place, and being honest and saying, we are trying to make a profit. This is how we are making a profit. I think that for too long the finance industry has sort of tried to hide profit and go, oh, we're not, don't worry about what we're getting out of it, hide it behind something. But I think that is not a good way to engender trust. Making sure that you're going, this is a commercial relationship, we're both getting something out of it, is a good way to make sure, that's not something that will turn people off. It's something that will really interest them and go, you are being honest with me. I understand why you are doing this now, and I trust you more for it.
Grace, back to you for a second. Ashok spoke just then about the real danger of financial services being moved into the plumbing, so sidelined, and the importance of adding value. Adding value is so important to any good insurer right now, to make it sort of so relevant to our lives. What do you think the main opportunities are for adding value?
I think it's understanding the totality of a person's needs around the risk. And some of the new insurtechs that you read a lot about, whether it's a Lemonade or a Root or a Hippo, they're all embracing that concept that the customer has needs that are beyond the piece of paper, which is the plumbing, my insurance contract, and they're trying to anticipate that. And I think we need to, as an industry, we've not been great at that. We have treated ourselves as part of the plumbing, and it's time we stepped out of the shadows to do that. I was going to comment on one other thing, which is creating value out of profit. and that is the ESG initiatives that companies do. It's becoming more and more important for us to demonstrate that we are using our corporate power, through our employees, through our physical premises, the decisions we make, through what we contribute and support, that we're contributing deeply to the planet and to making things better, and that our profits serve a different purpose, but still one that creates value for our customer.
Well, it's not a great leap, particularly with recent weather, to think, well, actually, that's directly relevant to you as a business and also directly relevant to customers. Martin, what do you think in terms of adding value? Do you think actually that, as Grace just hinted at, that banking and insurance perhaps are still catching up in terms of understanding what the value is that they offer, or the value to customers as customers see it? Do you think that's clear yet?
Well, I think all of them are working on it and really try to become truly customer centric. And kind of becoming really, if I look from the bank side, to becoming a financial partner, and from the insurance company side to be kind of a life partner for the single customer as well as for the whole family. So I think what Grace mentioned, to the end-to-end view of everything, I think that's very important. That I'm fully aware that needs a lot of data. It's not only dealing with the financial data. You need much more about that. But I think, and this is what Jason said before, you have to create kind of a win-win situation. And I think this way, if you be transparent on this path, the customers are willing to give this kind of information, but they have to understand what this means and what are you doing with that kind of data.
Jason, you're nodding there. Perhaps you're thinking about it. What do you think about that? Do you think that that value can definitely be demonstrated, and that people will share their data? It's a question we asked earlier on.
Yes, I think people will share their data if they think it is relevant and if they think you are going to treat it well. If they see why you want the data and that sort of thing. But
in terms of communication, Martin, what role does good communication really play, and actually, what role does really bad communication also really play?
Well, I think it's important to communicate this transparently and communicate proactively. That's a little bit what we discussed before, understanding the client needs and act in a proactive manner. And it's also important how one communicates. So you cannot just standardize everything. So it must be personalized. And if I speak about personalization, it's also about the channel, because someone wants to go over the digital channels, someone wants to go over the old standing channels, so they are not going away. So you really have to tailor-made on each and every channel. And if you speak about communication, it's not only about having a focus on each and every, it's really kind of jumping around. So that's a little bit the topic about omni-channel experience, to be able to address all the various channels.
Yeah. Let's talk about vulnerable customers for a second, because it has been so important. Let's reflect maybe just for a minute or so. Grace, in terms of underinsured and also vulnerable customers, it has been a very difficult time. It could continue to be a difficult time for lots of reasons. What more do you think insurers could do?
The challenges, they often don't identify themselves. So you're looking for sort of markers, and it involved quite a bit of training. And as I mentioned before, I think there are tools the industry could deploy more effectively, like voice analytics, to help with that. And underinsurance is again about helping people, identifying the people who need to be walked through the process and walking through the process so that they answer questions appropriately and they understand what they need. Brokers theoretically serve that purpose in some instances, but if you sell more directly, which we do, then you have to build in protection at the front end.
Yeah. Martin, just a final thing before we wrap up this particular part of the session. How do you think the roles and reputations of financial services providers could change as they play a deeper role in our lives? And that includes communication. Will there be a more productive relationship? What are your impressions looking and working with a lot of financial services companies?
Well, I think at the moment it's really about being more relevant in our lives and will enable the financial situation and standard of living to develop positively. However, I see it two-sided. So on one side, some banks in insurance will do a great job and being kind of the distributor of all these kind of services. But I think it's a huge challenge, and therefore I also see some banks and some insurance company more pushed to the background, being part of marketplaces. So not everyone can do and be that in that position. So it's kind of a separation going on at the moment.
Well, a huge thank you to our wonderful panel of experts who'll be back with us next week to talk about the hugely important topic of self-service automation. Let's round off today's discussion with Martin. Back to you. You're staying with us for a couple of minutes to review what we've just heard. Well, Martin, what advice would you give anybody watching us who wants to really build loyalty and trust? What are these key steps that we all need to take?
Well, first of all, this session was really insightful. To build loyalty and trust, 3 strategic changes are needed. First, act customer-centric. The customer has to be in focus, and his needs have to be thought about from the beginning to the end and finally supported in all scenarios where financial means and security are needed. Secondly, each individual must define what values they stand for and how to shift from being socially useless to socially useful. Each company has to create a competitive differentiation of emotional engagement. And last but not least, each financial service provider must think about how they can start a real conversation with the individual client, a conversation which is two-way, relevant, consistent, and clear.
Absolutely. There's a lot to unpack in there, but that's a really clear set of guidelines. A lot of work ahead in that case. But look, clearly adding value and convenience are very important to that as well. Can you get out your crystal ball and tell us what you think the journey for us as customers in financial services could look like in, say, 5 years? Is there a way of predicting how well we'll do this?
Well, 5 years is a long time, but I think there are many challenges to overcome in the near future. And I think there will have to be a focus on targeted, personalized services. So in order to be able to offer an overall added value, the financial service providers will have to open up and integrate themselves into a financial ecosystem. There will be those who will act in the foreground as distributors of these services, and there will be others who will act in the background.
But it sounds as though it really is an evolution, working from where we are to the future, rather than completely throwing everything out and starting again. We're definitely on the right road, even if we're not necessarily far enough along yet.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, a huge thank you to our guests today, but this is just the first episode. Do join us again this time next week to watch episode 2, where we'll be speaking to Dr. Francesca Carlesi, co-founder and CEO of Molo, who will tell us about how she's using automation to reach customers in times of need. And of course, we'll get much more insight from our panel of experts on how you can turn clunky user journeys into seamless experiences. In the meantime, please do send us your feedback on this and all of our episodes by completing the review form on the webpage. And of course, if you like the broadcast, please share it. Thanks very much for watching for now. See you next week. All the best. Take care.